Let me briefly share with you what I think today, this Shabbat, is about. Can you hear me? On the 1st of September 1939, Nazi Germany declared war on the world and attacked Poland. Polish forces, and many of us remember the images that we saw through the years of Polish fighters on horseback charging against German tanks, but Polish fighters were unable to stop the Polish advance, the Nazi advance on Poland. And Nazi forces, within about a week, reached the outskirts of Warsaw. They were at the gates of Warsaw by the 8th of September. And hundreds of thousands of people in Warsaw, approximately 250 to 300,000, hundreds of thousands of people in Warsaw, mounted a defense of Warsaw. And through bombardments of the Luftwaffe, of the Air Force, of the Nazi Air Force, through bombardments of the artillery, through bombardments of tanks, through attempted attacks, kept the Nazi armies at bay for approximately 3 weeks. Warsaw would become the capital that withstood the Nazis the longest time throughout Europe. No other capital resisted for a whole 3 weeks. By the end of September, the Polish government understood that it was hopeless and fled to Romania. The mayor of Warsaw capitulated, and on the 2nd of October, 1939, Nazi troops marched into Warsaw in a victory parade. Within 2 weeks, the Jews were dispossessed. The Jews were not allowed to use public transportation. The Jews were not allowed to use public parks. The Jews were not allowed to hold on to professional positions. The Jews started to have to wear yellow stars. The Jews were immediately discriminated against. Within about a year, on the 12th of October 1940, the Nazis established the Warsaw Ghetto. At first, the Jews were told they were going to move into the Warsaw Ghetto and they were going to be allowed to work outside, to go to their stores, to go to their businesses, to work on the outside. The Warsaw Ghetto, before the war, had been a dense and vibrant neighborhood of approximately 100,000 people. The Jews, before the war, amounted to over 35% of the people of Warsaw. These 100,000 people who had lived in the area that would become the Warsaw Ghetto were removed from the Warsaw Ghetto to make space for the Jews, who would now enter into 2% of the territory of Warsaw. 35% of the citizens of Warsaw entered into 2% of the territory. In the meantime, many of the buildings had been destroyed by bombardments, by what had happened during the war. People moving into the Warsaw Ghetto moved into public gardens, into any shelter they could find, to have the Nazis come in and take over all the public spaces. The area that had been home to 100,000 people quickly became home to 300, 350, 400, at its height, 450,000 people. In the middle of November of 1940, on the 16th of November in 1940, a wall was erected around the Warsaw Ghetto. People could no longer come in and out. of the Warsaw Ghetto. More than 2,500 Jewish stores and businesses were nationalized by the Nazis. Suddenly, there was no more food coming into the ghetto. Suddenly, there was nothing moving in. A group that formed part of a kind of an underground led by certain people in leadership recruited children 7 to 13 years old to try to pass through the cracks of the walls to get food, to get medicine from the outside in Warsaw and to bring it back in, with the Nazi forces looking to catch them. The Nazis, in the meantime, had created a council of Jews, what was called a Judenrat, of 24 people, along with assistants, along with others. They also created a Jewish security apparatus to help manage things in the ghetto. They told members of the Judenrat, their administrative help, and this Jewish safety organization that they would be well treated. They would be receiving preferential treatment when things happened. The leader of the Judenrat was an engineer by the name of Adam Cherniakov, who was appointed by the Nazis and had to lead this Judenrat. Food became scarce. Medication was almost non-existent. Food rations in the ghetto amounted to approximately 185 calories a day. 185 calories a day is less than a fifth of what a grown person needs in order to survive. People were starving in the streets. People were dying of illnesses in the streets. In the meantime, additional people were being sent into the ghetto. Gypsies, thousands of gypsies were sent to the ghetto, as well as Christians, mostly Catholics, of Jewish descent, who fell foul of the Nazi racial laws. There were churches in the Warsaw Ghetto. Hundreds of thousands of people in the Warsaw Ghetto. This continued with people being killed, being abused, dying of malnutrition, dying of diseases. Men, women, and children. Our story really starts on the eve of Tisha B'Av, 1942. On the 21st of July, Tisha B'Av, the eve of Tisha B'Av, 1942, the Nazis ordered the Judenrat, Adam Cherniakov and the Judenrat, to bring together 6,000, then 7,000, eventually 10,000 Jews for transport to the east on a daily basis to a place from which these Jews would be collected, put onto trains and be sent to the east. They could bring 15 kilograms worth of luggage and 3 days worth of rations of food. Adam Cherniakov quickly understood that these people were being transported to their deaths. Within 3 or 4 days, he committed suicide. Other members of the Judenrat and of this Jewish security apparatus were pacified by the Nazis, were told that they would be okay. And to make a long story short, between the 21st of July, 1942, and with a few breaks in between until the 28th of September, 1942, between 300,000 and 350,000 Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto were sent to their deaths in Treblinka. The number of people who were left in the ghetto were 50 to 60,000. That was the beginning of the decision of the Jews who remained in the Warsaw Ghetto to plan an uprising. On the 9th of January, 1943, Heinrich Himmler made it to the Warsaw Ghetto and complained to the command of the SS in the Warsaw Ghetto that the liquidation of the ghetto and the killing of Jews was not proceeding quickly enough. On the 18th of January, Nazi troops surrounded the ghetto, came into the ghetto, and started yet another Aktion. However, this time they were met by resistance. Within 4 to 5 days, they were only able to round up between 5,000 to 6,000 Jews, to put them on trains and to send them off to their deaths, with Jews simply not coming out, with Molotov bottles being thrown at Nazi soldiers, with altercations and disruptions. That led to underground movements outside the ghetto, non-Jewish Polish underground movements, to try to support the Jewish underground within the Warsaw Ghetto. The underground consisted of left-wing organizations, right-wing organizations that after this started to dig bunkers, started to collect weapons, started to build, to create Molotov bottles, makeshift bombs, makeshift weapons. On Erev Pesach of 1943, after the 9th of January and the 18th of January 1943, on Erev Pesach of 1943, the 19th of April 1943, the Nazis surrounded the Warsaw Ghetto yet again and entered the Warsaw Ghetto. SS troops with a tank riding in front of them, to be confronted this time with weapons, with Molotov bottles, and with violence. A number of Jewish fighters were able to kill a number of the Nazi soldiers and to throw Molotov bottles at the Nazi tank that drove in front of them, causing a fire in the Nazi tank, causing the Nazi tank to stop and blocking the advance of Nazi troops into the ghetto. For the very first time, Nazi troops retreated. For between 3 and 4 weeks, a group of approximately 750 fighters, 750 famished Jewish men and women, led by names by people whom today to us are legend: Frankel and Applebaum, Yitzhak Zuckerman, Mordechai Anilevich, and, by the way, a woman who was one of the leaders of this rebellion, Tzvia Lubatnik, who survived. 750 lightly armed men and women with no training, with approximately 1.5 dozen other fighters from the Polish underground that came to help them, held Nazi troops at bay for days. This weekend, 80 years ago, this weekend in 1943, a Jewish flag was flying over the Warsaw Ghetto. A white flag with blue stripes and a blue Star of David. Nazi soldiers came in strength to surround the ghetto. They entered into the ghetto, burning it building by building. By the 8th of May, resistance was all but destroyed, with a bunker of Mordechai Anilevich on the 8th of May being bombed and burnt out. And on the 16th of May, the SS General Jürgen Stroop sent a message to the German authorities in Berlin saying there was no more Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto was now rubble. To give you an idea, approximately 17, 18, maybe 19 German soldiers were killed during these 3 and some weeks. Between 90 and 100 were injured. The casualties within the ghetto were above 13,000. 65,000 people were captured, were either executed or sent to death camps as the ghetto was liquidated. During the same time, the Zionist movement here in America was organizing. During the same time, a very important conference in New York for August was being planned. And during the same time, one Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver learned about what was going on in the Warsaw Ghetto. Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver would travel to the Waldorf Conference in New York and would for the first time speak up against the express wishes of the United States government. Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver knew that FDR and the American government were already in March and April and May of 1943 starting to speak about a new world order that would occur in the post-war period. A world order that would be founded in human rights, that would be founded in respect for minorities, that would be founded in dignity, that would be founded with international mechanisms that would secure minorities. A new international order that would be democratic, a new international order in the context of which these kinds of horrors of the Second World War and the Holocaust would not occur again. And Abba Hillel Silver spoke to delegates of the Zionist Organization of America at the end of August. Having learned all of this, and we know from his writings, having planned this through April and May of 1943, telling the American delegates of the Zionist Organization of America that they now had to raise their voices and to act on their political rights for the sake of having a seat at the table when this new world order arose. This new American jury for Abba Hillel Silver would be an American jury that would speak up, and that would speak up for political rights, because American Jews speaking for their political rights would mean that the Jews of Europe would have political rights, that the Jews of Palestine would have political rights. Because if the Jews of Palestine had political rights, they would be able to express their association, their link, and their historical connection to the land of Israel. And if they could express that connection to the land of Israel, they could argue for Jewish immigration to the land of Israel. And if Jewish immigration to the land of Israel could take place, a Jewish state could be established. And if a Jewish state could be established in the land of Israel, the Jewish political rights of Jews in the diaspora and in the United States of America could be reinforced. And if these rights could be reinforced, we, the Jews of America and the Jews of the diaspora, could speak up for rights and for freedoms and for the respect of minorities, and to make sure that the horrors of the Second World War and the Holocaust would not take place again. Do not be beguiled, Abba Hillel Silver said to the delegates on the 30th of August, 1943 at the Waldorf. Every link in the chain is important. April, May, June, July, August of 1943 are regarded by the scholars of American Jewish history as the moment of the coming of age of American Jewry. Abba Hillel Silver took over the leadership of American Jewry fighting for a Jewish homeland in Palestine from Stephen Wise, who was reluctant to speak up in the face of opposition from the American administration. Abba Hillel Silver set a very high bar for us. A very high standard. Abba Hillel Silver called us to speak up for right, for justice, for goodness, for the respect of minorities, and for the rule of law. Abba Hillel Silver called upon American Jewry to speak up for Jewry at large and for others. Abba Hillel Silver called upon American Jewry to support the State of Israel so that the political rights of Jews throughout the world could be supported. This, I think, is what today is about. As European Jewry was being destroyed, as the Warsaw Ghetto that Abba Hillel Silver mentioned in his August 30th speech, which already didn't exist, which was already in rubble by that time. As these were being destroyed, Abba Hillel Silver called upon us to be a new kind of Jew and to take our mission as Jews seriously. And so I want to say to you this Shabbat, may we have the wisdom, may we have the merit, may we have the courage to live up to the mission and to the standard that Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver set for us. Shabbat Shalom.